So, okay, as you can see, Toby Harriet, a martial artist, a motorcycle, and they exploded some vases with color ported inside. Then you will be asking yourself how they can create assets like this with those. So, well, it's very simple. There's a new application for your smartphone or iPad, which is called Adobe Capture, and it's completely free. And just taking snapshots of pretty much anything, you can create color palettes, Photoshop brushes, and vector shapes that you can use in any of your designs. You can synchronize those resources if you have a Creative Cloud account, and you can access them both online or offline in any Creative Cloud application. So I was asked to create a new artwork on my own, but using some of the assets to bring some life to it. So these are the color themes I'll be using to creating this. Some of the brushes and the vector shapes. And yes, I will be using vector shapes to create this. So, well, since we're a bit late, I'm going to try to sum it up pretty fast. So, first of all, I want to talk to you about how I made the composition for this artwork. So, well, this was the main sketch that I sent to Adobe that was approved for this project. As you can see, it's a centered composition, but I want to talk to you about the row of thirds. Whoops. Okay, here we are. Sorry. Well, in case any of you doesn't know how the row of thirds works, it consists in tracing 4 equal lines dividing the canvas in 9 equal rectangles of the 33.3% of the aspect ratio of our image. Usually it's said that psychologically the human eye reads from top to bottom and left to right, and it's very useful to put our focal points in any of the intersections created by the row of thirds. But in this case, I'm going to create a centered composition, and I will use the row of thirds to create a dynamic tension. How am I going to do that? Well, let me show you all the compositive lines in this piece, which right now look like really messy, but I'm going to explain you how this works. First off, what I'm going to do is to split my canvas in half, because I want to create a centered composition with some tension. Then I will trace the horizon line, which is the borderline of the horizontal row of thirds. And coming from the row of thirds, I will create a pyramid, and where they cut, it will create a triangle where the most important information of the composition will go within. But as you can see, the head is a bit off because of that compositive tension I'm going to talk to you about. Then I created a secondary pyramid, and where it cuts, it's where our focus should appear. But since we want it a bit off to the right, I'm going to need to create a tertiary pyramid to create the compositive tension, which is this one. I will help myself using the row of thirds, or better said, not using them. How does it work? Well, I'll place 3 elements that will make the composition of. The first one, which will be the anchor point, will be in this intersection of the row of thirds, exactly in this intersection. The second one will be where the heart will be, which will be our focal point, and the third one will be farther away from this intersection of the row of thirds. This will make our composition to fall to the right. Well, I think you're watching me mirror it, but well, you get the idea. Okay, so it falls to the right and it might cause some issues. So I'm going to add a secondary focal point that will anchor the composition to the ground. How am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to trace 2 lines of direction that you will appreciate better if you see the final artwork. As you can see, there are 2 main directions that the composition follows. One of them is created by the line in focus, you can see it here. And the second one is created by many lines that are following some of the elements of the composition. the stones here, the leg, the arm, and of course the neck. Where both lines get touched, we'll establish a secondary focal point, as you can see. And this will grab more attention, but because of the composition I have created, our eye will go to the head. So well, now with this explained, I think it's time to start compositing the image in Photoshop. I want to tell you that if you have any question during the masterclass, please feel free to ask them in the chat. Every 5 or 10 minutes, I'll try to reply to some of them. And if I don't have the time, I will try to get back to you at the end of the masterclass, in which we will have like 10 minutes or so for replying questions and such. Also, I want to warn you of one thing. I'm not going to create the piece from scratch, sadly, because we don't have the time, because this is a very, very, very big file. So I'm just going to show you the workflow, and I will explain some tips and tricks that you can note down and use in your own compositions. So let's start with the first element. I place it here. I'm going to spend most of the masterclass browsing through layers, but please bear with me because there are hundreds of them. So this is the main element of our composition. It's a 3D figure I modeled in another software. I have to say I'm no 3D artist, so I had Photoshop to edit my renders because they don't render very well, to be honest. So I placed the image and I turned it into a smart object, so I can edit it in a different window in a non-destructible way. How did I fix this? Well, the main render has some issues with hard edge all over in the casted shadows, so I fixed that using the clone stamp tool, and then I overpainted it using the Burnout Freeze palette of the color themes from the Adobe Asset Lab. This is the main palette I'll be using during all the artwork to make everything look homogeneous, using the same colors all the time. So what I did was, first, this area is overexposed, so I overpainted it, fixed some hard edge around here, and then I overlaid some colors from the Burnout Freeze palette here, and we're good to go. Okay, here we have it, and now I'm going to build the background, and I will explain how I created the post-production for the figure later. Well, we go to the background. I created the background using the colors from the Burnout palette. Well, I'm noting the light here and the shadows here to know where everything is going to fall, more or less. And now it will be the time to create the scenario. But before that, I want to talk to you about resources. Here, there is a brief selection of all the resources I've been using to create this piece. As you can see, most of them are photos, some 3D renders, and of course the vector shapes from the Adobe Asset Lab. So, the layer section. Oh, well, this is what you can see. I cannot change right now. There are so many layers, and there are going to be even more. So, I'm going to need to go straight to the point, sorry. So, well, I can do it like this, but it's not going to help much. We're on to the resources. I want to talk to you about the importance to create our own resources. I know not everyone is able to own a photographic camera and such, but if you do, I'm really asking you to shoot your photos on your own, because now we are all saturated by stock photos from royalty-free sites, and everyone is using the same stuff, and we don't have control over them. Especially when we are working on matte painting or photorealistic photo manipulations, it's very important that we generate our own photos. Why? Because, for example, in this illustration, whoop, all of these photos you can see here were shot in the same time frame and in the same place. So they all have the same lighting direction, the same sharpening, and so on and so on. These were shot during what we call the golden hour in photography, which is meant to be the best time of the day to make photography. It appears at dawn and sunset, and it's where the light is softer. Also, I'll be using several plants and trees photos that I made sure to shoot with plain background, because I'll be using the color range option for masking them out, but I will explain this at the end of the masterclass. So some of the 3D renders, some texture from Adobe Stock, and the vector shapes. Okay, let's go with this scenario. I'm going to show you first. Oh, I have to hit this layer first. Sorry. I'm going to show you all the layers, and then I'll tell you about the masks. There are so many layers. I'm going to spend most of the masterclass browsing through them. Okay, so you can see all the layers here. Now I'm going to mask them out. I masked them out using the color range selecting tool, and in so few cases I had to use the pen tool. For example, to do this thing, there's no other way than to use the pen tool and spend like some hours of your life trying to mask it out. So, there's a rebel layer, which is here. As you can see, everything is falling with it very smoothly. I had in mind that place all the photos according to our lighting focus, or I'm not going to become mad while trying to paint in the light. So this is one of the important things to create our own resources, because we can control a lot of the stuff, because when we work from photos from different sources, we usually waste a lot of our time trying to find the right photos. Well, now I'm going to explain how to edit those photos in a non-destructive way. Imagine that this artwork was created for, I'm going to make this bigger, was created for a client, which in fact it was. And let's say that I want to edit this, like this, and I send it to my client. And then he or she tells me that he doesn't like it. So I have to revert it back. But then I've messed it up already. So well, there is an option that allows us to go back and forth and change editions in every one of our layers. You can do so, as you can see. If you click here and create a new adjustment layer and you press the Option key, you will see an arrow here. I don't know if you can see it. And if you press on it, it will affect only the layer it's linked to. Yeah, the camera. I use a Canon EOS 550D, and if I remember well, the lens was a 40mm 2.8 f, I think, or maybe the 70-100mm, something like that. Okay, so now that I have explained this adjustment tip, I'm going to reveal all the adjustment layers. I hope I don't forget any of those. Okay, now that we have the main scenario built, it's time to create the background, and it's time to give a very amazing tip. The original piece was 8000 width canvas, and the original photo was 5000 width in pixels. So if I would place the original photo here and I would enlarge it, it would get pixelated. But in the new version of Photoshop Creative Cloud, we have a fantastic resample option. You open an image here, and when you go to the image sites dialog window, in the resampling drop-down, we have two new ways of resampling for enlargement. My favorite one is Becubit Smoother because it doesn't oversharpen the image while making them larger. So let's say we want this size. Click OK. And as you can see, the loss of quality is minimal. If some noise might appear, we can go to Filter, Camera Raw, and use the noise reduction filter of here, which is awesome. as you can see, now it looks like straight from the camera. So this is very useful when we want to place elements or backgrounds in the very background of our composition if we are doing photorealistic stuff. How long does it normally take to create a piece from start to finish? Well, that depends on each piece. I spent 2 weeks on this one without counting the time I spent, well, for gathering the resources. Some pieces I've created in hours, in a few days, and some need months. It depends on the complexity of the artwork. So, well, what's next? I have my script here, just in case I messed it up. Okay, now I'm going to create the horizon, which is here. It's pretty much the same procedure. All the photos are from the same photo session, as I told you. I'm going to max them out, and I'm going to ask to add all the adjustment layers. If any of you have seen the speed up video of this piece that we released with the Adobe Acid Lab 2 months ago, you would have seen that this area was done by hand. What do I mean? These photos have a severe problem of chromatic aberration on all the edges. So even if we have some great selecting tools and filters in Photoshop, every time you watch a very complex artwork, keep in mind that most of the time we have to make the mask, make the lighting, and pretty much make everything with the more simple tools. Brush tool is our favorite friend, at least he is my best friend, and most of the complex stuff I do it with it. So, well, what's next? I'm going to talk about the main figure. Let me look for all the layers. Okay, here we are. Here's the statue. I'm going to add some adjustments here, the shadows. And another tip I want to give you about attached layers. As you know, if we create a new layer and we paint over it, it paints anywhere. But if we attach it to another layer, see, I press the Option key, I click, and then I paint, it only affects the layer it's attached to. So it comes very handy for painting shadows, which are, again, painting using the Bernat palette. With this tone, I will create the shadows. Never create your shadows by casting black colors, because that really difficult to actually happen in reality. Usually everything is tinted with colors. So well, now I'm going to talk to you about textures and blending modes. I'm sure most of you who are using Photoshop know and use the blending modes, but do you know how they actually work? Well, I'm going to explain because it's very simple and it will help you a lot to understand how to blend images. This first group, what it does is to get rid of the bright tones and it makes the dark tones to prevail, which is exactly the opposite of this secondary group, which keeps the bright tones and makes the dark tones disappear, and this third group, which makes a mixture. It gets rid of the middle tones and only leaves the dark and the bright tones. So, for example, let's see that overlay, it's like a mixture of the multiply and screen blending modes. So in this case, since our figure is bright already and I only want the dark parts of the textures, I'm going to use the multiply blending mode, and then I'll be adding the masks, which I did by command clicking the mask of the statue and loading them in these layers. And as you can see in this layer, we have some residual stuff which we can fix using a levels adjustment layer. So I'm going to show all the layers and all the effects. Some of the texture are hardly visible, but always the pixel perfection is in the details. Okay, and now I'm going to integrate the figure by adding some rocks here and there. This is painted using the color themes from the Adobe Asset Lab. Once again, this is the casted shadows. Again, see, it's not black. Keep that in mind. And I think I'm not missing pretty much. Well, these are the shadows. And now I'm going to place some more elements all over the place before I start explaining some basic capabilities for 3D in Photoshop. Okay, now I want to create my secondary focal point, which is the heart. I wasn't able to find or to photo doesn't peak of a heart, so I have to use a 3D model, which is here. It's a smart object, so I can open it in a new window, and I can use some of the 3D capabilities of Photoshop. I can move it, I can, well, pretty much do everything. Here I have the textures. The Orange Peel one is one of the default textures of Photoshop, so no need to import your own, but you have your own. It's obviously better. If we double click here, we have all the elements in the layer section of the 3D panel. We have here the light, which I have casted coming from here, like in the original artwork. And here we have the different wires from all the elements that we can freely edit. See? And when we are done, we just need to go to the render dialog and render it, but I'm not going to do that because it will take like several minutes to do it. I have some question here. Through the rendering software, I'm using the Eray engine from NVIDIA, but I'm not using it with an NVIDIA card, only with the processor. It gives awesome result if you are achieving to create photorealistic stuff. And I have another question here. Oh well, this one is very complex to reply now. I'll go for what tools would you like to have added into Photoshop? Photoshop works perfectly for me, so by now I only needed a powerful noise reduction filter, and it's already in the Camera Raw plugin here, so I'm very happy right now. So well, I'll be adding the mask here and some adjustment layers. Okay, and now I think it's time to start talking the Adobe Asset Lab, which I think is one of the reasons you are here right now. So well, some of you may be asking yourselves how I've been able to merge several vector shapes into a photorealistic composition. Well, there is just a small tip, and it's nothing too complicated. This is one of the shapes. I'm going to do it from scratch so you can see it. I drag it here in the canvas, and since those are smart objects, if we resize them, but then we make them bigger again, they won't lose any quality and all the borders will be razor sharp again. So what did I do to blend this into the figure? First, of course, I made this mask and added a Gaussian Flare small filter, so the razor sharp edges disappear. And of course, I added a gradient overlay using the colors from the Barnard color theme. I'm going to show you another vector shapes I use, if I can find it. It's here. Okay, this one. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better. Okay. I had to raster this layer so I could use the smudge tool to add some movement to it. This way, this file looks like some bitmap, and the gradient overlay was one of the default gradient overlays of Photoshop. So yes, they are actually useful sometimes. So well, I'm going to unhide some layers that are not especially important. And this, what is this? You may be asking. This is a secondary render I did from the main figure with a different texture. So I could place it just in the same place just for the hand, because I wanted a golden hand. And if I will try to recreate the texture of a hand, which is something very difficult to do, I will have to need to spend hours on it. So since I have the chance to recreate the render, I did the same position with the same lighting to place the hand. So let me see if I'm missing anything. Well, now I want to tell you about another new surprise in the Adobe Creative Cloud libraries. As I have told you, sometimes we have to look for resourceful images to complete our illustrations. And for example, in my case here, I needed some gold textures because I couldn't find any of my own. So if we open the Creative Cloud Libraries panel, we have here, I hope you can see it, an ST icon. Is the icon for Adobe Stock. If we click it, it will open the Adobe Stock website. And let's say I want to look for something golden. Okay, Facebook, way to go. Okay, let's say I like this texture. You have to be logged in. And let's say I want to use it. So I'm going to save a preview in my Volnicura folder of Creative Cloud. So well, I'm going back here. And I'm going to search in my Volnicura folder, and here it is. We just need to drag and drop it here, and we can do pretty much anything we want. So let's see, we want to send this to a client, and the client says, okay, I like it. Well, I hope he doesn't like this. So we just have to right-click here and license the image, and it will substitute the low resolution copy with the original resolution one, and we don't need to make everything else. It's pretty easy. Okay, messing this up. So I'm going to show you the several layers I used from Adobe Stock to complete my illustration. Here they are the debris explosion brushes from the Asset Lab, as you can see here. I'm going to explain you how to use them effectively because they are very playful. Again, I'm going to the Adobe Asset Lab panel, and let's see, I want to use this one. I'm going to take the pen here, and we can, this is the default look they will have. But if we press F5 and go to the brush panel, has several options for spacing. Well, you get the idea. So this comes very handy. We want to create debris effects. You can apply this kind of scattering option to pretty much any brush you can think of. So well, let me see to my marvelous script again, because I don't want to miss anything, because I need to compensate you for starting this 10 minutes late. So, okay, we're going to the foreground elements. I want to take you about focal distance now. When we are creating photorealistic stuff or photo manipulations, it's very important that we arrange all layers accordingly. At the bottom, I have the background layers, and in the middle, I have the main scenario photos and the figure, and everything that is going to be in front of them should be above, because that will make things easier when we want to create some depth of field. So here, it's pretty much the same. I'm going to add a lot of elements with the masks and some textures. Sorry. It's exactly the same as I did in the background. Okay, and this is one of the most important layers in this composition, lightning. So you can see now it looks more integrated. Again, was created with the burnout color theme. this tone for lightning, this tone for shadows. And then I'm going to tell you about first plane elements, if I find them. Here they are. Okay, I was talking to you about depth of field, so I masked those layers out and turned them into smart objects so I could apply a smart filter, in this case Gaussian blur. So imagine I want to get rid of the depth of field here, so I just need to do this, or if I want to increase it, I just need to do this, which will come very handy. We want to create that here. And now, oh, I missed one Adobe Stock layer. Well, this is live, guys. This is what happens. I'm not missing any layer now. I think I don't. No, and now one of my favorite parts of this masterclass, I'm going to explain to you how to color range masking in Photoshop. And I'm going to do that using the stills from the original video. I'm just going to show them all, and then I will create the selection from scratch. In fact, the part I love the most in the video was this, and the Adobe guys were kindly enough to bring me some of the stills from the video to work with them. So, well, you may be asking how have I been able to get this out, because it is possible to do with a max reset brush or with an eraser and such. Well, let me show you. Let's take one of the stills, this one for example, drag it to Photoshop, and let's go to color range. Well, this tool, when we pick a color cluster, Photoshop will interpret it and will isolate all the similar color cluster in the Illustrator, in the photo, according to the fuzziness we marked. So we press OK, and if we select any of the selection tools or go to the select menu, we have this wonderful option which is Refine Edge. I have to invert the selection first. Okay, so here we have plenty of options to enhance our selection. Okay, let's say it like this. Okay, this should work. And we click the mask icon to max it out. I'm going to use a soft brush to get rid of everything else. Okay, and now I'm going to drag this to the canvas. Well, there are new questions. Andrew, what program did you use for the original statue? You mentioned you are not a 3D artist, but this is really good. Oh, well, thank you. I said before, I used the DAZ3D Studio with the Irai engine for rendering. Well, another question. Does licensing the image also work if you've already warped it? Oh, well, I don't know. If anyone in the chat room knows, please reply to Team Window 2, because I don't know if warping will actually blend the image. I think it won't, but I cannot assure you because I have not tried it, sorry. So, well, continue with the marking with the color range method. Let's say I'm going to place this here, and it already looks very good, but we can make it even better. If we go to the layer styles window, we can go to the inner glow and pick a color similar to a layer. So in case there are any borders that are not working well, they will do now. And now we can place this pretty much anywhere you want, and this is very useful to create very complex selections. Goodbye. Okay, another thing to have in mind. Think that this is color powder floating all over the place, and we have to fill the air because otherwise it would look like really weird. So I painted some layers with a soft brush to make the movement bit of the powder all over the place. Well, I'm going to talk about the last elements of the composition. The first one is that I needed to create a scale here, a scale reference, because I wanted the statue to look very big, and I didn't know how to do that, and I reached the conclusion that placing some tiny birds here and there, the human eye would understand the original scale of the birds and will think that the statue is actually gigantic. So well, now I'm going to finish the composition with the spheres to create the tension I was talking to you about. I'm going to place the biggest one here in this intersection of the roll of thirds, which will be the base of the compositive tension pyramid, and then I will duplicate it several times, well, in fact, a lot of them, and I will always turn them so the rightest part is always pointing to the lightning focus for lightning currents. So I tune them up, make the volume, and now I'm going to show you the composition rules again. So you can see I have the base here, secondary here, and even if you think that some of those spheres are placed randomly, they are not. The secondary spheres in size are very near the edges of the main pyramid, and the smallest ones are always touching any of the compositive lines. So everything is in its right place. So, well, let me see if I have missed any layer, which I hope I didn't. Great, okay, and we are perfectly in time, so I'm going to start explaining some post-production tips, which I think is one of the things you have been expecting the most. So, okay, going back to the Barnard color theme, I will create an overlay blue here to increase the contrast and make the image like it's going more for the night than for the day. I will increase the lightning here with another tone from the color explosion palette. And then to enhance the lighting, I'm going to use a black and white adjustment layer with a yellow filter. And why a yellow filter, you may ask? Well, if you think about it, the lightning coming from a light focus is really warm, it's almost yellow, it's golden. So if we select a yellow filter, all the yellow tones will get brighter. If we go for a blue filter, for example, it will increase the lighting in our shadows, and that's not what we want. So let's go for a yellow filter, and to make it only affect the lightning, we'll set it in luminosity blending mode. Well, now I'm going to talk to you about particles, a lot of them. Air is always filled with stuff, so if you want to add some magic and fill the atmosphere and the air of your composition, I recommend you to get particle photos that you can photograph at night. If it's raining, you just have to point your camera and you will get photos like those. Let me show you. For example, with black background, and you just need to put this in screen blending mode to create your particles. This is also very useful to mark the depth of field, because you can use several layers, blur some in the first planes, and have sharpened ones in the focal distance where our focus is. Where can I find the see-through spheres? Well, you have two options. You can photograph them by yourself, as I did, or you can create them from scratch in Photoshop using vectorial shapes and then painting the lighting and the shadows on your own. Any of the resources from this image were downloading from the internet. All of them were photographed by myself, except the ones that were provided by Adobe and Adobe Stock. Okay, I continue. Well, I'm going to add some more adjustment layers to this. First, I will add a gradient map in soft light mode to enhance the atmosphere. See, it's making the golden and the purple hues to pop out a bit more. And also a selective color adjustment layer, which is one of my favorites because you can change the tone of, well, pretty much anything in the image. It's really useful. You can play with all channels and with white, neutrals and blacks. And now, if you have attended already to any of my master classes before this one, you will know by now one of my master tricks I always teach in my classes, which is the blur trick, to create atmosphere and to blend all the colors together. But I'm going to do it from scratch because I think it's going to be funny. Okay, there's an option in Photoshop in which if we press Command, Option, Shift and the E keys, it will create a new layer with the information of all the layers in the document. Here we can either add smart filters or regular filters if we don't need to change them later. So let's say that I want to add some atmosphere to the image. I'm going to the Gaussian blur option. Let's press OK. And let's see, I want to add atmosphere only to the light tones. I'm going to screen. And the colors will blend, but the image will end up being overexposed. But we can fix that. Going to levels. And what should I make? Well, I should make the dark tones in the mid area to disappear. And I will play with opacity. For example, like this. I'm going to leave the one I already did just in case. Okay, this is the last lighting adjustment I'm going to do. If you pay attention of this area, it's underexposed and we never want to have it underexposed because of this overlay blue layer. So using soft light and a bright brush, I'm bringing the dark tones to pop out again. There's another questions. You can simply add a 3D sphere in Photoshop, then apply any kind of texture transparency to do the same thing. Yes, that's correct. But again, as I told you all, I'm really new to 3D, so I think the master class in 3D, you can give it to me anytime you want to pay me up for this. What do you think? Okay, light adjustment to the air by filling the color in soft light. This creates a great atmosphere. And now what I will create is a new sample layer, but this time I'm going to add a smart filter of Camera Raw. Every time I finish a new illustration, I like to finish it with a Camera Raw adjustment because it allows us to play with everything. And when I say everything, it's pretty much everything. It's like a mini Photoshop inside Photoshop. It's really useful when you're working on photography or photo manipulation, well, pretty much everything. But when you're doing photorealistic stuff with a lot of complex lighting and color and such, it comes in very handy. Because you can play with the tinting and change the mood of the image in a lot of ways, in a very simple way. Just don't do it like I'm doing it right now. Sorry, this is just to show you. Let's see, the noise reduction filter, which is very useful if we are using photos from several sources. This will bring all the noise of all of them to the same level, and this is something which is great. We have a lot of options to play with the color. We have the luminance option, which is not available in the hue saturation option in Photoshop. Split toning, well, you have a lot of stuff, and since it's a smart filter, we can change the look at full at any given time. And I'm going to show you an example. Let's say that I don't want this layer anymore. So I will come here, I will make a new stamp layer, and I'm going to turn it to smart filter field first, smart object. Okay. And then if I drag the filter, it works exactly in the same way. So it's very useful if we send our image to a client and he doesn't like it, so we can go back as many times as our client wants. So well, we are almost done here. The last trick I'm going to show you in this post-production process is to use a smart filter in the blur gallery using a full blur. I'm going to show you guys. This will help us to create the depth of field. I'm going to place several anchor points set to 0, so this is sharpened, and here I will add another that I can change at any time and change the depth of field. Since it's a smart filter, we can change it anytime, and we can change the bouquet. Well, we have plenty of options here. I think I have more questions. Oh my god, have a lot of questions. Okay, what was the command here to get the new layer with data? Okay, note this down. Command or Control if you are on Windows, Option or Alt key, Shift key, and the E key. Is there a reason you choose a Camera Raw instead of Lightroom? Of course, Camera Raw is inside Photoshop, so I don't have to be importing and exporting files. And Sarah, is it easier to use a 3D figure than painting it? Oh well, you caught me here. I don't know, both methods are very difficult because you have to work from scratch. I guess that modeling 3D figures is more difficult because you have to be aware of all the dimensions, and in painting you have to be aware only of the bidimensional aspect of what you are painting. So it depends on if you have a good visual vision and a good space vision or not. I think this depends on each one. So well, I'm continuing. I'm almost finishing. So sad. Here's another soft light blur to enhance the contrast again. And talking about contrast, I'm going to introduce my best friend to you all, the histogram. No Instagram, histogram. Okay, bad joke. I won't do it again, I promise. Okay, here we can see the color garment information in each of the lighting channels. This sounds weird, but the thing you need to have in mind is those corners. Here you have the highlights and the shadows. If we have peaks here, that will mean that we have over and underexposed areas in our artwork, and that's bad. That's bad because if we intend to print our images afterwards, we will have areas in white and areas in black, and that won't look especially good. Well, it depends on your style, but it won't go fine with mine. So what I'm going to add a level adjustment layer, and I'm going to decrease the contrast here. And as you can see now, the peaks disappear and the change it's almost unnoticeable. So I'm done here. I'm going to reply to this last question, and then I'm going to ask you so you can win the poster from this illustration. Andrew, one question I have about the refined edge tool for masking. Whenever I try to mask out hair or soft edge, I end up with a gray edge, especially if there is a little fall off on the focus. Have terrible issues mainly with people with light hair. And in terms of recomposition light hair, yes, I think. If you go to the color range, if it ever opens, you will find here, no, sorry. If you go to the, I'm going to make a selection. You go to the refine edge option. You have here, well, it won't allow me now, but you have here the decontaminate colors, the amount, and the way you're going to put this. It doesn't always work smoothly or perfectly, but it will help you out a lot to avoid weight curls while masking hair. Use this a lot. Also, you can use this brush tool, and while you paint, it will recreate the selection inside the area you have painted. I hope this helps. Okay. So, please pay big attention right now. I'm going to throw the questions, and the first one to reply it correctly in the chat will win a poster of Bulnikura. So, here I go. It's very easy. Just be ready on your keyboard. which was my color theme of choice from Adobe Asset Lab. It's your time, guys. So meanwhile you are replying, I want to thank you all very much for coming and for attending the class. I hope my English has been understandable because it's not my native tongue. I hope my tips might be useful for you. I know there is a lot of people in the chat room. Thank you very much. This is something awesome and great. I hope I have not given the class so fast, but I needed to give a lot of content in so little time. So, well, we have like 5 or 10 minutes left. So any questions you might have, Natalia will be asking them to me here, and I will try to reply to you. If you want me to zoom in some areas to explain something again, to explain something I have not explained, or whatever you might dream of, I'm here for the next minutes to reply to your questions. And well, let's see if someone tells me who's the fortunate winner of the poster of Volnicura. So well, keep that question coming. I'm not in the chat room, as you can see, so I have to wait for Natalia to send me the questions. Again, I don't know if I can explain something else. Meanwhile, the questions are coming. Because I guess you are going to send the questions, right? You are not going to leave me here speaking to my monitor. This is really weird. No, there is like 1,000 persons behind of my screen, but I'm talking to my screen, and this is actually really weird. Well, okay. Well, I don't know what else I can explain. I'm waiting for... Okay, we have a winner! Chris UK, congratulations, you have won a 50x70 centimeters poster of Volnicura that we will send to you very soon. I don't know how many of you have sent the right questions, but Chris, congratulations again. You can send an email to llopez@adobe.com with your address. I'm going to tell someone to write that down. Oh, well, no, easier. Send an email to this address and we will send your poster. Okay? I hope you are still online, Chris, so you can know where to send your email to claim your praise. Okay, let's start with the questions. Craig, do you always start with a strong idea of what you want to do, or do you kind of make it up as you go through experimentation? Well, most likely is the second one, because I like to just experiment, to open Photoshop and start throwing things inside. At first it's really chaotic, it's really messy, but in my personal works, what I want is to discover myself and know what I'm trying to tell the world. So I just start throwing stuff to the canvas until I start to see a pattern, and I think, oh well, this is what I want to say, and then I start to refine everything and to build the history. But when I'm working for clients, obviously I have to make brainstorming, sketching, send to them and get the approval, because I start to build complex composition like this, because otherwise I will need to go back and forth. Antoni, which method do you use for doing layer masks? Oh, this question is really weird because half of the masterclass was about that. Well, I usually use the color range method, I thought. And also sometimes I use the pen tool to create a vectorial mask, and then I love the selection from it. I'm painting the mask. For blending, I use soft brushes. And for selections, usually I use Control-click in a layer, select a new layer, and click the mask icon here, and it loads the selection. Well, they're telling me that most people answered correctly. Okay, so you were paying attention. That makes me very, very happy. Thank you. I was not talking just to my screen. Okay, Steve, do you use color to choose your color set before you're making artwork? No. Color comes with the flow, in my case. Joel, what tool do you use to correct perspective if it doesn't match with the rest of the elements? Well, usually if the photo I'm going to use doesn't match the perspective, I don't use it. Never, ever, ever. Because no matter how you try to improve it, you won't unless the difference in perspective is very, very, very small, and usually it doesn't. So if you use photos with different perspective, most likely you are going to end up with something really, really weird. So I don't recommend you using photos from different perspective. Never. Please do it. Listen to me. Jan, your work is fantastic. What other artists do you take inspiration from? Okay, I don't tend to take inspiration from others, but I'm going to tell you who my favorite artists are, which are, of course, some of the surrealists: Magritte, Dali, De Chirico, Max Ernst, Picasso, of course. And also from illustration, my two favorite ones are Dave McKean, Travis Smith, and also one of my friends, which is Marcela Bolivar, who creates kick-ass artworks. I guess some of you know her already. You know my work. Most likely you are going to know her as well, because we're like tight and we do things really similar. Okay, Andrew, I share your initial plan and concept. What is a true representation of your final idea, or was there a flexibility throughout your process? Well, let's see the sketch. Someday. This was the idea. I didn't have clear how I was going to create the environment and to place all the elements for the compositive tension. I only have clear that I wanted a scenario created by rocks, the sky behind, and the statue emerging from it. While working on the Photoshop file, everything came smoothly, so I gathered the resources as I needed them besides the scenario ones. Sarah, are you always doing realistic art? If not, what is your favorite take to create something? No, I'm not always doing realistic art, and in fact, lately, both in my personal and my commercial artworks, I tend to do things more expressive, more minimal, or more abstract, because I've been working on this like for 15 years, and well, we all have certain evolutions, and in my case I want to create something with more impact and more iconic. Very complex artwork sometimes can be very boring because you have to spend a lot of time in composition, in gathering resources, in making photos, in rendering 3D figures. And then when you are in the process, sometimes you are building it and you say, but is this going to work actually when I release it? I don't know what to do. And sometimes I end up with a dozen of PSD unfinished because I'm not sure if investing some months of my time finishing hyper-realistic artwork is going to pay off. Steve, how long does it take you to do that? Well, as I said before, in this piece, it took, if I remember well, about 2 weeks time, full time. Was all the day here talking with the Adobe guys and sending, resending, blah, 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 blah. But each artwork, depending on the complexity and my amount of available time, it might take from hours, if they are very simple designs, to weeks or to even months. When I say months, I want to explain that sometimes I just have like 2-3 hours a day to work on personal artworks because I'm working on commission or networking or marketing, or I'm not in the studio. So I have so little time to work on my own work, so I spend like 2-3 hours each day, and it might take months because I'm always working in several pieces at the same time. Next one, Boris. Can you show some of your other projects? What was your favorite one? Well, if you want to see my projects, I'm going to go to Behance, and now I'm going to take advantage of something I wanted to tell you, but I forgot. This is my Behance page is Aegis illustration. Here you have most of my projects. You have also a link to my website, aegisstripe.net. And here we have the Asset Lab project that we did when we released the campaign 2 months ago. And I'm going to ask you to stay up to date here, because you will find a written tutorial, the speed up video with all the process, and we are going to embed in the following hours or days, I'm not sure. This very own masterclass will be embedded here, and you will be able to watch it over and over again if you feel like it. Okay, so everyone, they're telling me that it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very, 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 very much for coming. I hope you have had so much fun. Thank you so much for your question, for paying attention. Congratulations, Chris, for winning the poster. Stay up to date on my Behance to see the workshop anytime you want. And we will announce new masterclasses as soon as possible. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you very, very much for coming. And as you can see, I'm going to cut the streaming right now. Love you all and see you in the next one.